not all sellers are for all buyers. Not all buyers are for all sellers.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
Lindsay, I'm doing all right. It's a little chilly here in South Carolina. I know that there's lots of people all across the country that'll roll their eyes when they hear me say that, but it's a little chilly. And that means that I'm getting visited by palmetto bugs today, and I'm doing my best not to freak out about it, if I'm being real. So while I'm doing okay, I could do without that. How about that? How is your day going, Linz?
I'm doing good. We'll excuse any squeals that come from you. I'll put a note in the recording file to edit out any squeals from palmetto bugs.
Oh man, the world we live in, right? It's just crazy. But I looked down and saw something moving and thought, this cannot be possible in the middle of a podcast. I'm going to try and keep composure, and we're going to try and do this as well, because we've got an incredible. We got two incredible guests today. I am really honored to have both Jake Jensen and Kevin Callister of the Leavitt Group joining us today. Kevin and Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to
it. I'm trying to think, Jake, did we meet 2 years ago? Has it been 2 years, really?
Yeah, I think it probably has been 2 years now, Carey.
Oh my goodness. So for the people on the call that either don't know who the Leavitt Group is or haven't met either one of you, I'd love for you guys to just give a quick background of who you are, what you do, and how you found insurance as your passion and career.
Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, you bet. So Leavitt Group, we formed back in 1952, so 70 plus years now. Dixie Leavitt, our founder at the time, he was a school teacher selling insurance on the side. Found out pretty quick that he was going to make a lot more money doing insurance than school teaching, and so he started doing that. And since then, we've just continued to grow. He and his brother partnered up. We bought a few agencies up and down I-15 here in Utah, some smaller agencies. And we just started to grow. And then probably in the late 80s and 90s, we branched out into California, Arizona, Nevada, more, and of course, Utah. And then over the past probably 20 years, we've really branched out. And now we're about 90 agencies throughout the country. And we're in about 30 states, I think. Kevin, is that right? 30 states.
About 29, I think, just shy.
Yeah, and just to introduce myself, and then I'll let Kevin go introduce himself also. I came from central Utah, a small town called Castledale, Utah. If any of your listeners have ever heard of Sean Bradley is 7'6", played basketball in the NBA. He comes from Castledale. He's our claim to fame.
Fame. I love it.
Yeah, that's right. And so I came down to Southern Utah University. Got a master's in accounting here in Cedar City, Utah, which is where SUU is located. Leavitt Group is an employer of choice, and they recruited both me and Kevin this way, and a bunch of others. And we came over, started as interns, and became controllers, and then we moved into a management position. And then over the last 4 or 5 years now, I've been doing affiliations with Kevin. Kevin's the lead of our affiliations team.
Give a quick intro into your family too, Jake.
Yeah, for sure.
I got 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy, 22, 20. Geez, I shouldn't have tried to do this. 17 and 15, I think.
Wow, I love it. That's awesome.
We have a lot of fun together. Sports has been one of our main things, just following them around doing sports. I got a volleyballer and a dancer right now, and it consumes our life. We just love it here in Cedar City. It's a smaller community that is a really good place to raise families. And
I love that.
despite of Kevin, our family's pretty good. Anyway.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, when my kids were around your kids' age, I was thinking to myself this urgency, like, oh my goodness, the time's going to run out that I'm not going to be able to spend time with my kids.
Yeah.
I got to push everything into this time that we have before they spread their wings and they go. And it just makes me laugh a little bit because we're sitting on a podcast with my daughter at the moment and I get to spend a lot of time with her. And what a gift, like what an absolute gift. So anyway, I also say, like, enjoy it while you have it, but also build the thing after that they want to spend the time. And I know you both do that because I also know you guys a little bit, but it's a special gift when your kids want to spend time with you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, let's hear about you because you too have an amazing family as well, but I'd love to hear a little bit of your story as well.
You bet. Yeah. And I'll say this, I'm jealous of you two. I always wanted to grow up and work with my dad. My dad was in the education profession, so it didn't work from our standpoint. So take it while you have it. That's a really cool thing to have. So I'm actually from small town Utah as well. Ephraim, Utah is the name of the city I'm from. It's actually from the other side of the mountain from where Jake is. We have absolutely no claim to fame other than we are the beautiful side of the mountain. That's if you come and check it out. That's you'll see that I'm right. So I'm from a town of about 2,500 people. There was a junior college in our city, and the town doubled when school was in session. So it came down here to Cedar City and went to school as well. And after serving a mission for a church, Jake and I actually both served missions over in the Philippines. Spent a couple of years in the Philippines, which was an interesting fact about us, and learned the local language there. Tagalog is the name of it, and we've forgotten all of it since then. There's nobody here. I started with the company about 23 years ago, going on 24 years now this year. I'm married. I've got 5 kids. My wife and I, Bonnie and I, have 5 kids. The oldest is married and has a kid on the way. So we're going to be grandparents here in about 3 months, about 4 months, I guess. So countdown's on. We're excited about that. Our oldest boy is serving mission for a church over in Barcelona, Spain for a couple of years. Ooh. Then I've got a senior in high school, a freshman in high school, and then a third grader, a little bonus baby that God slipped in on us. So we're excited about him. We love him too. A lot of tears for the last kid, but we love him. He's a blast. So we've been in Cedar City since to the year 2000, the year we got married, and again went to school, SUU. Started out with the company in 2001. Totally fell into insurance. I was doing an internship on the accounting side of things, which is my background. Same with Jake. And anyway, long story short is about 10 years ago, August of 2014, the Leavitt family asked me to shift roles a bit and jump into the acquisition, the M&A side of things. And so I've been leading the M&A side of things since August of 2014. It's been a dream. It's awesome. It's fun to work with people that you love to work with. Jake being one of those. Got a brother and a nephew on the team and as well. And anyway, team about 13 people in the Leavitt Group. And if we squill, it'll be Jake likely if that happens. It's for no other reason. There's no palmetto bugs. It was just Jake squealing. That's what he does.
I love it.
Oh, that's hilarious. All right. So jumping right in. So obviously we like to kick off every like M&A type of conversation with talking about the hard market. So in your guys' experience, obviously you've been in the business for long enough to see before, see after, see all of the ups and downs in between. So how do you think that the M&A environment has changed during the hard market?
It's a good question. This hard market, I'll tell you a quick story. In a board meeting, Dixie Leavitt, our founder, Jake mentioned him. He's now 95, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. He still comes into the office, still has a role. He's obviously turned to leadership over the boys long ago, but he still comes in. He made mention of the fact that in this hard market, he's seeing things that he's never seen before. And when you've got somebody in the company that makes that comment after 72 years in the business is where he's at now. He started in 1952, so 72 years in the business. And Dixie Leavitt is saying that he's seeing things that he's never seen before. Your ears perk up a little bit. right? That's a big deal. And so this has been a hard market like we've never seen, and I don't believe anybody's ever seen, quite frankly. So it has undoubtedly changed the way that agencies do business, the way that they interact with carriers. I would say that's one of the areas where we have seen the biggest change in our model is our relationship with carriers. Carriers came down and they just tightened up. That's typical in a hard market, right? That's what they do. But they've tightened up like they've never done before. And, Nationwide was one of those that tightened up in a way that they've never done before. And that was part of that. Part of that was driven by their model. Part of that was driven by the hard market and so forth. But that's where we've seen a ton of change in this last little bit. And so they started to tighten the belt. They started to tighten up on what they write. They've started to tighten up on their commissions that they're paying out. And every one of these things trickle down into the M&A market, quite frankly, because it impacts a company's financials. And as we all know, valuations are based off of EBITDA, the pre-tax cash flow. And so every one of these agencies are impacted, whether they know it or not, whether they realize it or not, whether they realize the significance of it or not. It's been a very critical thing. So we've certainly seen that. We've seen that impact the number of sellers that are out there. Some have pulled back and not wanted to sell at this point because they feel like they need to change the way in which they do business, the manner in which they do business, their own personal model. We've seen some jump in because it scares them, quite frankly, and they feel like I've got to take advantage of the pricing while it's still somewhat high. We've seen multiples change a little bit over the last little bit, in some negatively. For the platform agencies, I would say it stayed the same because they're kind of the pick of the litter. So it's been crazy all across the board.
So hang on just one second. I know exactly what you're talking about. For the listeners, I want you to define a couple of things that you just said. So platform agency, what do you mean by that?
So a platform to us, this isn't necessarily the same for everybody. We kind of oftentimes we'll speak in terms of hub and spoke. Hub being the platform, which is a standalone agency within the Leavitt Group or any other entity that's out there, any other broker that's out there buying. It would be a standalone agency with us. We have the ability to go standalone at a much smaller level than many others do because our model, and we'll get into that a little bit, but that's the crux of it for us and most agencies, most brokers out there is it generally stands alone as opposed to the spoke side of it, the tuck in, the roll in. You're going to hear all of those terms throughout the industry. Those are the ones that you're rolling into and tucking into that platform style agency and in a sense being subsumed into that agency.
So you also said that, for larger platform agencies, multiples remain the same, but I've been seeing the same thing. Like, obviously I live in this world. I do valuations. I don't buy agencies. I don't broker agencies at all, but I certainly help them plan for and hope to give them as many options as possible as they move into planning for the future of their agency. That's really why we're here, help them from a financial standpoint. And a lot of agencies, because of the hard market and because it created a lot more retention work, a lot more stress if they were heavily weighted with one carrier, and potentially the need to innovate, use technology, whatever. Lots of agencies thought now might be the time for me to exit. Multiples remained high. I have the highest revenue I've ever had, and there's some hurdles in order to maintain it. Are you seeing the same kind of mentality or thought process from the sellers that you're coming across?
Yeah, we are. We're seeing that, and again, we're seeing both sides of it. Let me be very clear. There's some that are going the opposite direction for sure, but yeah, everything that you just mentioned there is exactly correct, and part of the dynamic of this culture that we're seeing at this point in time. They and some of them do so because they don't. It's just one more tough hurdle that they have to jump through if they stand alone. If they stay on their own, they've got to go out, to your point, they've got to go out and be innovative. They've got to get into the technology side of things and innovate in that world. They've got to innovate in the way that they're dealing with carriers, quite frankly. They've got to innovate in the way that they're dealing with every one of their vendor partners. And so it's just one more hurdle at a time when they may be a little bit tired. Like you say, multiples are still high. So why not just pull off the table at this point in time and see if we can't get a good price out of it and go about it in that way. Integration is key if you're jumping into a world like that, because otherwise you're just passing a problem along.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a firm believer that not every buyer is right for every seller, and not every seller is right for every buyer, especially where you're in a market that is nowhere near anything that we've seen before. Like I call them Lindsay calls them her insurance uncles, but people who've been in this industry for a really long time that taught me what I now know about insurance. We've never experienced a market like this, a hard market that's maintained and had so many contributing factors as to why it's been hardened. And really nobody knows exactly how fast this is going to soften, or over what period of time, or if it even is going to go back to something that we were used to prior. My gut is it probably will not, but that not every buyer's right for every seller and not every seller's right for every buyer is more important now than ever. And in my opinion, I've been in this industry for about 16 years. Lots of sellers think in buckets. Like, I can sell to an agency that looks just like me. I can sell internally to someone inside my organization, or I can sell to PE, and it's all in one bucket. Honestly, if you are in this industry, over time, all three of those have changed, like the structures of what happened and everything. Give me your perspective on what's changed in the M&A space over the last 15 years with buyers, because you're on that side. Like, what has come in and how are they different?
Yeah, you mentioned private equity, and private equity is, I would say, the biggest change. I mean, when you look back 15 years ago, and I don't have my date stamps here and to be exact, but you look at banks were a big acquirer at that point in time. They were huge, and now you look at it, and the banking industry is largely, they're gone. They do not exist today for all intents and purposes from an acquisitive standpoint. Private equity, in turn, has jumped into the market. This private equity market has seen that the industry is a great one. The annuitized revenue that comes in, the strong cash flow that materializes as a result of it, they've come in and realized the strength of that. And so they just continue to jump in year after year after year. You see that happen. And so but at the same time, so that would be the biggest change, I would say. But at the same time, I'm like you, and we feel that way significantly. And Jake, I want you to jump in here and talk a little bit about what we see in this market and what we fit well with and so forth, maybe some of the cultural aspects, because that'll be critical. But let me just make this one last point before you do. Not all sellers are for all buyers. Not all buyers are for all sellers. That is a critical point in this whole thing. And if you go in with that mentality, you're making an enormous mistake, because you can lump it into that, but not all private equity is the same. Some of them, I mentioned integration, for example, earlier. Some of them may integrate to a certain level. Some of them, many of them do not. Most of them don't. You look at our model, we fully integrate. It's a critical piece of our model, and that's what we believe makes a bit of this secret sauce that we talk about. Standing on your own and perpetuating producers even looks different than where it's ever been. And we consider ourselves a bit of a hybrid from that perspective as well, because we have the ability to integrate, bring people into a larger group from an affiliation process, we call it, while at the same time perpetuating to key people within the agency, which is a nice thing. Everybody is different. Know who you're getting into bed with, so to speak. When you're jumping into that market, do the research. It's imperative that you do that for sure. Jake, talk a little bit about our side and what we the segment that we consider ourselves perfect for as we go down that path.
Yeah, just to kind of answer some of what Carey says and echo what she says. I think buyers and sellers need to match up. well. And there are a few places that they should match up. Number one being culture. You've got to be able to work together. You've got to do, if you have a different culture in your agency that's going to affect clients, then that's going to really potentially have a negative effect on the entire deal itself. So culture, you've got to look at culture, which includes, what's life going to look like for the employees afterwards? What's life going to look like for your clients afterwards? And that's truly what we're trying to figure out. I mean, that's what brings us all the money, right? That's what makes all of our lives better, is clients and employees and the communities we work in. So those things also, sellers need to look at, autonomy. Do they have true autonomy if they do a deal over here versus somebody over here? And what does that look like? And how can they figure that out before they close on the deal? What are ways that they can go about figuring out the culture, the autonomy? Also, the ownership model afterwards is important. That goes to autonomy. If they're going to be able to retain some equity, obviously that's a big deal, because that means they're going to be able to continue to make decisions that they always have. So, and then the last one I'll hit is the vision or the goals of the two entities getting together. If they don't have the same vision, if the seller's coming in and their goal is to, retire, get out, and that's what their team's goal is, and the buyer wants to grow, there's going to be a lot of friction, and that could cause a lot of disappointment potentially in a deal. And so you're right. Not every seller, not every buyer are made for each other. It really is important to do more due diligence than just, hey, what's the highest price I can get for this?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's been I think the market's been so hot that agencies have been realizing, like, oh, I can get a really high multiple, or my value is really, really high right now. And a question that's been popping up a lot recently is, are we at an all-time high? How do you guys answer that question?
Yeah, I would say we're at an all-time high. I'll go back to the platform versus, the hub versus the spoke side of things. I would say for the platform side of things, we are at an all-time high. Whether it's going to go higher or not, I don't know. I mean, I think 3 years ago we probably thought we were at an all-time high then, and it probably wasn't going any higher, but it did. And so I would be one to say that, yeah, it's probably going to creep up even more, just as depends on the market and the future of our economic, engine here in the country. But I would assume it's probably going to a little bit. The others, we've actually seen a bit of a softening going on. When you get into I'd say the smaller agencies, those that aren't as prepped for sell, I would call it. I would actually say that we've seen a little bit of a softening of those multiples over the last few years with these tougher economic conditions that we find ourselves in. That, my sense is again, depending on what happens with the market, that'll probably pick up again at some point in time. But it feels a little soft to me at this point in time.
So Kevin, I was on a call with two lenders, and we were doing our year-end predictions. And honestly, it's recorded, so we could all go back and listen to what we said and all that happy stuff. And I'm not sure that I would.
This, are you? Are you recording?
Oh,
this?
we're definitely recording. Yeah. So anyway, and I thought about that same question, because I get asked all the time, do you think we're at an all-time high? And what would cause the multiple to go down? That's really the question that I like to answer, because if you think about it, I don't know if it was Jake or you that said it, but the retention rate and the predictability of ongoing revenue and that retention, which means are your people happy? Are your customers happy? That's really what attracts private equity to here, or anybody to buy your agency, is because it's predictable and there's a high likelihood that your customers are going to stay. When that changes, that's when the multiples are going to drop, because it's either uncertain or it's started to erode. And I don't see anything right now doing that, but agents that stay too long and aren't investing, and they're not able to keep and compete with those that are investing in processes or outsourcing or technology in order to be where the customer needs them to be, aren't seeing the same results as the agents that are. So
Yeah.
I think the gap between the multiples for agents that are investing and those that maybe stayed too long and aren't investing is starting to widen.
Yeah.
And so it's a and or not a everybody across the board. The other thing I'll tell you is, I don't know if you hear this, but I certainly hear this, is people want to assume the same multiple across many agencies. I want to assume a multiple of revenue. Well, let me just tell you, at the end of the hard market, an agency that has the same revenue as yours, but didn't retain their book the same way, and now, premiums are going down, rates are going down, they're going to be valued very differently. One that actually maintained all their customers and one that did not, very different story. It's actually very dangerous time
It
to
is.
be thinking about multiples that are across the board. How do you guys explain that to someone who comes to you and assumes, well, Joe down the street sold their agency for X. Why can't I sell my agency for the same?
Yeah.
How do you address that?
We hit 2 points on that. Number one is our comment, very similar to yours. Not all agencies are valued alike. And we use the exact same example as you do. You can have the exact same revenues, $5 million in revenue. And the agencies either have different growth engines, meaning one might not have any and the other is very robust. One maybe has much more cash flow, maybe it's 40% EBITDA as opposed to the other one that's 20% EBITDA. You cannot value each one of those agencies alike. They are not alike. They are two very, very, very different agencies. The other thing that comes into play is geography, quite frankly. The market within that state, specifically, those types of things come into play as well that cause value differences or variances between two agencies. So that's point number one. Point number two that we like to mention or at least discuss is that we try to pull back the curtain and be very, very, very transparent with anybody that we're talking to. And we tell everybody, look, anybody that gives you a multiple of revenue and tells you that that's how they're valuing it, they're either not a very sophisticated buyer or they're lying to you, because no agency is valued based off of revenue. It might be presented that way in the proposal, but every valuation is created, and ours are no different. Every one is created based off of EBITDA, based off of earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, or pre-tax cash flow. Every one of them. And that's a critical point to make for every one of these agencies. Some of them don't understand that because they're so used to thinking in terms of multiples of revenue, and back in the day that was 1.25 times and then 1.5 times. And now that's crept up because the EBITDA multiples have crept up. And so I think those are critical points for each of these sellers to be thinking about, understanding as they prep to go into this market. Jake, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, I've seen a couple examples where somebody comes in and they give us their financials and their EBITDA is really low, right? And they think that they should get a high revenue multiple, even though their EBITDA is low. It goes to Kevin's point. But I've also seen the other side where they come in and they give us financials that show 50, 60% EBITDA, crazy numbers that are not sustainable. And to me, that is an agency that also hasn't prepped itself because they're just sucking every ounce of cash out. They're not investing in producers. They're not investing in technology. So when we put that valuation together, well, we are investing in those things. So we're going to add those expenses to their EBITDA. And when we do a valuation, it's not going to be based on 50 or 60% EBITDA. It's going to be something much more normal, that we're used to. And so I've seen it both ways where I think an agency that's getting ready to sell needs to, think about these things. What does a buyer want and how do they, what do they want? What are their goals, and how do we fit within those goals? And most buyers have the same goals. We want to do it because we want to grow. We want to retain accounts. We want to hire producers.
Right.
We want to invest in technology. And so they should definitely be aware of those things also.
Can I share one other example on just from the thinking out of the box? And when I say thinking out of the box, I mean thinking out of my own personal box. And I'll explain what I mean by that, my own personal paradigm. I was talking to an agency just last month, beginning part of November. And these guys, they're a great agency, about $4 to $5-ish million in revenue. They've prided themselves on one aspect I'll mention, many different things they pride themselves on, but one I'll mention is always having your employees literally in-house, sitting at a desk in the office here in America, where they're the city that they're in, whatever the case may be. That's what they pride themselves on. And they were very staunch and hard-lined in that paradigm. But just recently, to their credit, they've begun to look outside of their own personal box and begin to wonder, okay, are we missing anything? And if so, what are we missing? And now they've jumped into a bit more of the offshore type hiring that can leverage their people even greater. It allows them to be innovative in the way that they go about it. They've invested more in remote employees because they had so many of their employees picked off from other brokers that were big on the remote side. They jumped outside of their own personal paradigm, their own personal box, and they're going to be better for it. They're going to be more valuable for it. It was a critical component for them and a critical time for them to be able to do that. It's everybody needs to be doing that.
So I think it's really important because when we say things like not every buyer's right for every seller and not every seller's right for every buyer, a seller needs to know what's most important to them, because a seller at a certain stage of life might be looking for something completely different than someone who's at the end of their career. And Jake, what you said about, how are your employees going to feel? How are your customers going to feel? How are you going to feel as an owner working in a different environment than what you're used to? And it could vary, different variations of how much that change is going to happen. But the number one underestimated thing, in my opinion, is the ability to potentially work for someone else at the end of your career versus someone who's been their own boss for a really long time. And if you're not honest with yourself of what you're willing to do, you could have regret with one of the largest decisions of your life, right? And it's interesting. We all talk about multiples and money and how much is this going to be, but when it comes right down to it, people are typically the first things on a seller's mind. How are my people going to feel? How are my customers going to feel? How am I going to feel? And how is my family going to feel? And if you got to that and you really think about what that day two is, then who the right buyer is becomes really apparent, because that is something you can relate to. It's the numbers on the page that can cloud that. Is that something that you guys have experienced? And I guess, number one, have you experienced it? And what advice would you give to someone as they're trying to navigate that for themselves? How would you tell them after you've seen this multiple times? How do you navigate that for yourself?
Go ahead, Jake, and I'll add some. I'll have some follow up for it.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Carey. It really is, when it comes down to it, that is the key. Money's money, and regardless of where you're going to go, you're going to get a good check when you sell your agency. And so, what are those other things that matter most to you? And so, as we've done that, we go, we try to give them. We're as upfront, honest as we can be. We want them to see the sausage being made, so to speak. Inviting them to different, activities or trade shows that we put on really goes a long way. Giving them people that they can call and ask questions about who we are as buyers. And hitting on some of those intangible things like, do they do what they said they would do? Are they honest? what is life like day 2, as you put it, compared to day -1 before we did the deal? What are the changes, and how do
Sure.
they deal with these changes? And how much autonomy am I going to have? Those things are so important. And so any kind of work a seller can do to get behind the scenes and see exactly what's going on is going to be well worth it for them, so that they don't get into a situation that they frankly look back on and say, dang, I messed up. I should have done something else. That's the worst position you want to be as a seller.
It's a big decision. You don't want to have regret in that decision. There's no two ways around that. Kevin, would you give any different advice to someone who's navigating that?
Here's the only different advice I would give, and it's along the same lines, but it's just a different number that I'm going to throw out. We talk about day 2. If I'm in your shoes, if I'm in the seller's shoes, I want to know what day 366 looks like. Mm-hmm. I want to know what day 730 looks like. You know what I mean? And the reason why I say that is because anybody can fake it for a month, maybe even a year.
It's true.
But I want to know what it's like long term, whether I'm getting out or not in that period of time. Usually they'll stay on through the earn out period. And so you're talking anywhere from 1, 2, 3 years, maybe even upwards of 4 years in some cases. I want to know what life's like from that perspective. So that's my advice, is actually look a little bit deeper, talk to those that have been with the company for a little bit longer than just day 2. Second piece of advice is ask the questions about your employees. What's life like for the employees, not just yourself after the fact, because everybody, I hope everybody cares about their employees, varying levels of that for sure, no doubt about it. But if you can find out what life is like for your employees after the fact, that is critical, because you've got your check. We call it the Happy Gilmore check, right? You've got your Happy Gilmore check. They didn't. And they're the ones that need to stick around and typically be a part of that new culture, that new company. And sometimes it's a shock, sometimes it's a vastly different experience for them than it is for the seller himself, him or herself. So that's a critical piece of it as well.
Yeah. Not only that, they're critical to the success of the ongoing retention of your book. I mean, especially if it's an exiting owner that isn't planning on staying past an earn out, like those are the people creating the continuity and the transferability of your book. So, and your customer relationships, the whole staff relationships, I think that should be the number one thing you should be thinking about, because it's so critical to the entire success of this transaction. There's no two ways around that.
We actually feel like we found a really good culture fit when the sellers are concerned about their employees. Price matters. Like Jake says, price matters. You're going to get your check guaranteed. We're competitive. Everybody's competitive. Price matters. Let's not dispute that. But for them, they have the ability to make or break that post-transaction environment. And we love to see the sellers actually share their earnout with their employees. They're critical to that. Why not share a piece of that with them? We love that. It's a great way to go about it.
Well, I love that you both were willing to come on and talk about, the other side of this. I can guarantee you it is not a one size fits all on this side. When you're talking about it, it's certainly not a one size fits all when you're talking about the different buyers that are out there. I look forward to bringing this to light as much as we possibly can. We'll probably have you guys back on. I actually want to do a panel discussion for lots of different people to hear different perspectives of different buyers, because I think, that's why we created this podcast. Is there's a lot of things that people don't talk about. Like, you don't talk about the terms of your sale. You don't talk about certain things, but there's been agents that have been willing to come here and talk about it so others can learn from them sometimes in a general sense and sometimes in a pretty specific way. So I would love to continue to do that, because I think it's one of the biggest secrets, that this is not a one size fits all at all. And there's a lot of things to think about. And it's not a decision you should make hastily. It's a decision you should be very incredibly thoughtful about. And there's a lot of options out there that are unique. And if you dig far enough, you can find them. So I would love for you guys to come back and do that. I certainly hope I get to see you guys in the future at some events. As you know, I think that's Jake. That's how you and I got to know each other, right?
Right.
But thank you so much for coming and spending time with us. And if someone wants to reach out and learn more, how could they find both of you?
Jake, go ahead.
You can email is obviously Jake-Jensen or hyphen Jake-Jensen with an EN at Leavitt, LEAVITT.com, or you can find us on the website, Leavitt.com. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd say I'm Kevin at Leavitt.com, and then go to Leavitt.com/join, and you'll be able to see all about us and find our information on there as well, cell phones and everything. And we'll echo what you said, but in reverse, Carey. Thank you for letting us jump on. We love it. We love sharing our story and sharing intel about the industry. And we would welcome any chance to be able to do that further in the future. So I love it.
Awesome. Well, I expect to see pictures of that new grandbaby soon, Kevin, just so you know. Like, I want to see that for sure.
You'll get it as soon as he is here. We know it's a boy. So I've got a girl and 4 boys. I didn't mention what they all were. So the boy factory continues into the grandkids stage. This is good.
Very nice. I love that. Well, you guys have a wonderful holiday, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the new year.
Thanks, guys. You too.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks, Carey.
Take care.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.